Welcome to the Run Out. I am your host, Neil Barrett. On today's episode, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. K18 himself, Kyle Harrison. Now, Kyle needs no introduction. He is one of the greatest players to ever pick up a lacrosse stick. You all know that. But what you might not know is that as good of a player as Kyle was on the field, he's arguably an even better human being off it. You know how they say never meet your heroes? Well, Kyle is definitely an exception to that rule. He has always been gracious with his time and thoughtful with his commitment to give back to the lacrosse community. Back in 2016, when I was first breaking onto the scene making lacrosse content, I had a podcast with a buddy called the Lax Nerds, and before we had ever recorded an episode, we reached out to Kyle to see if he would join us, and he agreed without any hesitation. And that story really isn't even unique or all that noteworthy. In fact, stories like that are a dime a dozen when it comes to Kyle. He really is the guy that you hope he is. Today, we talk about how Kyle wanted to go to UNC and how his time with the Ohio Machine, that was too much. That was way too much. So we talk about how he wanted to go to UNC, how his time with the Ohio Machine mirrored his time at Hopkins, and what he sees as his role in the game now that he is retired, as well as many, many more things. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, we are here with Kyle Harrison. You guys know who Kyle is, of course. I could read out the accolades, but we'll be here all day if I do that. So this is the first time we've talked. I think it's been since 2016. I mean, some interactions here and there online, but yeah. I think 2017 maybe was the last time. So
yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, a lot has happened. Most importantly, you retired. You've been out of the game for 3 years.
I have. It's crazy, man. I got old. It happened quickly.
How is retirement?
Oh, come on, man. Yeah. Well, one, Neil, thank you for having me on, brother. To your point, we've definitely interacted over social, and so I pay attention to everything you do, from the graphics you drop to some of the takes you have on there. So I appreciate our interactions, and I'm looking forward to another conversation. But retirement, man, it's been incredible. I think I've gotten to spend more time with my kids and my wife and my family, and reprioritize things. And I think when you play something, as long as I was fortunate enough to play, at the end of it, you start to realize like the sacrifices everybody else had to make for me to do that. Where my wife and everything she had to take on because I had to train or go play or travel somewhere, and the time you miss with your kids. And I think I'm lucky, Neil, that I retired, 3 years ago now. Daughter's 9, son is 7. And so I'm still now I'm around on summer weekends, so when stuff's fun, right? Like when you're doing kid stuff. And there was, a lot of those times I was gone. And so I've long-winded answer, but it's been great.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things like when Lyle stepped away from the PLL and people were like, oh, we don't get it. And it was like, I mean, you're not getting that time back. So no, I never. Totally understand. What is something maybe that you didn't expect that you have enjoyed about retirement? Obviously, time with kids and family is probably number one, but yeah. What's something maybe you didn't expect that you're really enjoying about retirement?
You know what, man? I'm really enjoying watching. I think it's interesting. I talked to NFL guys, former NFL players, NBA players, retired, and then obviously retired lacrosse players. Just as I was going through that phase, I don't know. You know how it goes, man. I was contemplating retire, or knew I was retiring. Right, specifically that last season, I had had to talk with my wife and family, and it was very clear that was it. And so I started to seek some guidance from folks that had been through a similar process of retirement, and it was funny. It was split. It was like the guys that retired older had no regrets, right? They were like, the time with your family, the time that you get to focus on business or whatever it is, you're going to be your passion from a career perspective. And then like your time around the game, like you're gonna love it, right? And then there was other guys who were like, you're gonna miss playing and all those things. And the reality is, dude, I played for so long that there's no part of me that like will watch the Redwoods and Chaos play, and I'm like, shit, I need to be out. Like, no, I can't. I don't want to play with those dudes. Like the way they are, how hard they check, the pace of the game, everything about it. Like, I've genuinely enjoyed watching games and like enjoying the ridiculously incredible talent that's on the field with like no feeling of regret that I'm not doing it. I literally, there's no part of me that wants to step on a field at that level ever again. Obviously, I still love the game. I still shoot. I'll mess around in Ocean City. I'll, play men's league sometimes, but I love getting to enjoy the PLL and how talented these dudes are, with no feeling of like missing playing. I do not miss playing at that level.
You said something real quick there. Men's league? You're showing up on men's league fields?
Look, man, I'll show up at a men's league games at 8 p.m. I'm in. There was a couple at 9 p.m. last season. I was like, fellas, there's no shot. Like, there's no shot. Yeah, like it's just, that means the game ends at 10. That means I'm home at 10:15, 10:30. You shower. All of a sudden it's 11. Now I'm hungry because I just ran around. It's 11:45. Like, absolutely not. So if it's a 7 or 8 p.m. men's league game, look for your boy. If not, like, it's just not happening.
You're I think 2 years older than me, so similar boat. It's something I have noticed, especially in the last probably 3 to 5 years, is how much that late bedtime is a killer.
No, it's a non-starter. No, my kids don't care what time I was up to. Like, it's on and popping at 5:45. Like, they don't care what happened the night before. Like, they expect dad to be up and ready to rock. So, and then obviously you got to work all. Like, no, man, 9 p.m. game. Don't look for me.
Let's go way back then. Way back. Yeah. We'll go back to Friends. You're in a weird position now where you've been out for 3 years, and you didn't retire exactly young either. So I feel like there's a lot of people that probably don't know your kind of whole story. So I was doing deep dive, and I feel like even I learned some stuff, and I've followed you forever. So like I said, we'll go back to Friends. You were a 3-sport athlete, right. Lacrosse, soccer, basketball, and right. And more than anyone, you hear lots of big time professional athletes who were very successful in one, maybe 2 sports, but you were successful in all 3. You won 2 state championships in lacrosse and basketball, and a state championship in basketball. Is that right?
Yeah, we won some championships.
Wikipedia has that right?
We won some championships. It was good. We look, man. I loved my time at Friends. The Quaker school. My older sister she's 6 years older than me. And I think, they put her at Friends in 6th grade. So I was there in kindergarten. And, we hit this point, Neil, in 8th grade where like I was starting to show signs that maybe athletically this Quaker school that didn't care about athletics or didn't put athletics on a pedestal probably wasn't the right spot for me for high school. And so we looked around. I went everywhere. I went to Gilman. I went to St. Paul's. I went to Loyola. I toured all of them because I had teammates for other club teams that went to these schools, and ultimately we decided like, look, all my friends are at Friends, and if I'm as talented as we're hoping I turn into, like this is I'll be okay, and if not, then it wasn't meant to be, right? And so I stayed at Friends, and I loved my time there, man, because for every win we had to just grind, and like everybody had to play a role, and the ball, like all the lucky bounces that we talk about in sports all the time, like all those had to happen, like in order for us to have success. And we had a fun time there, and we strung together a couple good years. We won a couple B conference lacrosse championships, and we bumped up to the A conference my junior and senior year, which is like playing all the big boys. And I loved it. Honestly, those 2 years are how I ended up at Hopkins, because we're playing against dudes that, I think St. Paul, like half of the damn St. Paul's team of my class, like had committed to Virginia. So we had coaches just around all the time. And so I loved my time there, brother. I loved soccer. It was probably the one out of the 3 that I played the least and pursued the least in terms of like college, but I loved it. Like I loved loved the flow of it. I loved all the different strategies on both sides of the ball. But basketball was definitely my first sport. Then it was lacrosse. Then it was
soccer. Is basketball, in especially at this time where you picked up the jump shot? Is that where that comes from?
No, so the jump shot, honestly, man, the jump shot in lacrosse for me, it came from basketball, right? Like the trying to generate power to go up and try and dunk, like that made sense, right? Because I mean, any kid that plays basketball anywhere in the world, like, is trying to figure out how it starts trying to touch the net, right? And then it starts trying to generate enough power to get the rim, and then it starts trying to slap the backboard, and then you're up trying to dunk. And so that motion made sense. And so when I was like a little skinny guy, first there's a picture of my dad taking a jump shot in his office. So that was already ingrained in my head of like, dad wearing 18, taking a jump shot. So I'm already thinking jump shot. And then when I got on the field, like, I could just never figure out how to generate enough power without jumping to shoot the ball. And so like the timing of like coming out of a dodge and jumping and shooting, just, it felt natural. And then like, I remember I got to Hopkins and like Coach T at the beginning was like messing with it. And he's like, we'll stay put here. Why don't you keep shooting? Like, you stay with this. This seems to make sense to you. Let's just go with this one. And so it just made sense to me, honestly.
Yeah, that's one of those conversations I have all the time as a coach, is like, how much do we, try and modify mechanics on things that just are working? I guess what was the recruiting process like? You kind of mentioned pursuing some of the other sports. How serious did you get down that road? And then obviously choosing lacrosse. What was it like? Was it always Hopkins? Were there other schools that were seriously looking at, or?
Yeah. No, so recruiting, like basketball, I just never grew, man. I think in retrospect, if I was serious about basketball, there were some things I could have done differently, teams I probably could have played on. My summers, really, if you were going to be a hooper, your summers need to be spent on the AAU circuit, like doing what you're doing. I just didn't do that. I was a big camp guy, so I was at camps for every sport: camps for basketball, camps for lacrosse, camps for soccer, even until the end. I feel like my junior year summer, I was still at camps. And so recruiting wise, early on basketball, I heard from like lower, Davidson, Seton Hall, Xavier early on. But again, a 6'1" guard that back at the time didn't shoot it terribly well. I could get to the bucket, make some plays in transition, was good on defense. But yeah, nothing crazy from the hoops perspective. And then lacrosse wise, I'm trying to remember what were my visits. I went to UVA. I went to my official UVA, Maryland, UNC, and then Hopkins. I always can't remember the fifth school, but and Hopkins. Those are my four. And honestly, I wanted to go to UNC. That's where my mom's side of the family is from Durham. I still am a Jordan guy. Like I wanted to go there. Yeah, right. Everybody our age was. And so like that just made sense to me. And I had my mind made up. I went down there first, actually, because I assumed that like this trip was going to be the one. And, met with the staff and just understood what some of their preferences were in terms of the hierarchy of their list and where I stood on their list. And I wasn't at the top of it, which is okay. And so I came home. I went to Hopkins. Happened to my best friend in the world, Benson Irwin, went to friends with me from second grade. We didn't plan it, but we both, like, Benson was looking at Georgetown. He thought that's where he wanted to go. I thought I wanted to go to UNC. We both went on those trips on those weekends. Didn't love them and didn't go the way we thought it would. So the following weekend, we both had our official at Hopkins. And that just happened. I mean, Coach Petro, Coach T, all those guys were smart. That happened to be the weekend that like everybody was there. So that year was like Peter Lesor was there and had committed already. Kyle Berry was there. I don't know if he had committed yet, but he was close to it. Chris Watson was there. Tom Garvey, like that whole senior class that ended up going, undefeated at home and winning that national championship senior year. Like they were all there that same weekend. So me and Benson went, loved it. Well, I was like pretty confident I wanted to go. But my parents were like, you committed to go to an official at Maryland. You committed to go down to Virginia and see the school. Like you're going to do those things. So we did those things. And then ultimately decided like Hopkins is where I'd like to be. I'm a Baltimore kid. My family's in Baltimore. That was that, man. So it was great. I mean, it was funny. Coach, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the story from millions of people. Coach Petro goes from the nicest person on planet Earth in the recruiting process at your house. And then you get to campus, a kid from Friends, like expecting that same guy. And it just was not the case when we got on the
Totally
field.
different.
Yeah, it was just a little bit of a shock. But honestly, that's what people like me and Benson need, or players like me and Benson needed, coming from Friends and being held accountable by him and the staff. And I just remember there were so many things that like, man, we should have like gone and watched Gilman practices or St. Paul's practices or something, because like I remember literally, this is fall ball day one. And I can't remember what drill it was, but me and Benson were on the sideline and like they were subbing through the midline. And we were like, what the hell are they doing? Like we typically like sprint all the way to the box. And I remember like dudes heard us talking, like, no, it's just quicker this way. If you like get your sub player on and go to the midline, like, got it. Okay. Like, no, we definitely weren't doing that at Friends. We were sprinting from one side of the field all the way to the damn box to get off. So there was like little learning curves like that. But man, it was best decision I've ever made.
Yeah. As you know, I'm a Duke fan, and as a Duke fan, I have to thank my stars that you and Paul Rabel did not end up at Carolina, like apparently both of you wanted to.
Yeah, for sure. That was the dream.
Yeah, that would have changed some things for sure.
They had a good run. I mean, look, man, we would have run. I mean, they had Jed Prosner. They had some dudes there at that point. So we would have had a good run.
So that would have been a very good team, and again probably would have changed some things. So anyway, you go to Hopkins and you start as a freshman on the first line, which is says a lot, especially at a school like Hopkins. I did want to point out that you were the main taker of the faceoffs as a freshman. Yeah. And you were 63% your freshman year. That would have been number one this year. You would have topped faceoff charts this year. We all think that faceoffs have changed so drastically, but
no, man. Look, I remember it was really fun. So when I got to, it was one of those things where like, and this is great. This is like a great mentality as an athlete to have coming from Friends. I didn't know where I stood there, right? Like I knew that the coaches like had a deep belief that athletically, like I could help probably pretty early on. I would be helpful. I didn't know what that meant though. I didn't know if that meant D-midi. I didn't know if that meant wings of face-offs. I didn't know if that meant, I just didn't know. And so, that first practice that I was just talking about when we were just all over the damn place with subbing, we also did one-on-ones that practice. And like, I was pretty bouncy off the dodge. So like confidence wise in my head, I was like, okay, like I think I'm okay here from a dodging perspective. I think there's an opportunity to play offense. And then I'm looking at the face-off guys' work, and I don't know if you remember him, Adam Doniger, like our at the time our junior captain, best player, first team All-American. I'm watching big ass Adam take face-offs. I'm like, that's a mess. Like that's definitely not a recipe for success up there. And so there was just really no plan. And I had faced off in high school and not at a really high level. I'd say I would, it was more of like an athletic battle. Like if the ball was out somewhere within 5 yards, like just me and the other face-off guy, let's see who can get to it quicker. So that's really what I did in high school. And then when I got to college, and saw that happening at face-off X, they were like, okay, why don't you face off in high school? Why don't you pop up here? Let's do what you can do. So I started working with the face-off coaches, and we really just developed like different moves again to just get the ball out of there into space where like I could be an athlete. And when you look at like the Greg Grenlins of the world and what he was able to accomplish, Trevor Baptiste, and these guys that just control the ball, like that. To be clear, that was not me. I was a get the ball into space and try and go be an athlete and pick it up. And I got skilled at it, throughout my career. And I think what was great about Hopkins, what the coaching staff did, is they just recruited like the same guy. And so if you watched Hopkins in that era, it was me. I'd face off. And as I got older, I took less and less because responsibilities picked up on both sides of the ball. But like it was me that could like, if I lost it, I'm dropping back on defense and I'm playing. If I lost it and I can take it away from you, I'm going to try and do that. Or I'm going to win it and I'm going to go push transition, make something happen. So it would be me to do that, and then it'd be Greg Pizer to do that, and then it would be Steven Pizer to do that, and like you just kept rolling out the same type of dude that could kind of just do do it all in that perspective, whether they won or lost, like they're going to make it a fight and then play defense or go play offense. And that was super helpful for me, especially as I got older and didn't take as many. It was great to be able to roll them out.
Is that something that was, I don't know if intentional is the right word, but over your 4 years there, it was a whole lot of guys that are like obviously supremely talented, athletically gifted, all that stuff. But there seemed to be a very a mentality of like whatever I got to do, one to help the team, but also just to be on the field. If I got to take face-offs, if I got to play defensive midi, if I got to run. I mean, we were just talking on Twitter the other day about Benson Irwin and like that dude. I think you saw maybe my tweet where I was like, you were the player that you played basketball. I played basketball growing up. You were the guy that I watched, and I could see the way that you were seeing the game because you saw it the way I saw it. You saw it like basketball. And so even though I really wanted to dislike you because you were a Hopkins guy and you were beating the teams that I liked, I couldn't. I just loved your game. But Benson was that guy that I didn't even want to hate that dude. Like all he did was do everything right. And I'm wondering if that was kind of a thing that just kind of permeated. Was that kind of the culture at Hopkins when you were there?
Yeah, man, it was. And that was the type of cats that staff recruited, right? Like, again, Benson, like me, when we got there, Benson didn't know what his role was going to be either, right? Benson, athletically, wildly gifted, could have played either side of the ball, but temperamentally and just like his personality, he's definitely more defense than offense. And so, like, again, that first practice, like, can run by them, right? When they're not sliding to them. And they're like, oh, all right, well, there's our starting D midi as a freshman. And I mean, one of those like tough as nails guys, right? Like doesn't miss practice, can have shin splints, broken bones. You're not pulling him off the field. And so I got to watch it obviously from second grade. And so I knew when we got there, I knew where Benson was going to end up. But it was fun for me to be able to watch, finally at the end of our career at Hopkins, like, arguably the biggest play in Hopkins across history in the last, 20 years, 30 years was made by him. And for me, it was just gratifying. Like watching like the dude, the unsung hero does all the dirty work. Like I'd say big part of my career, specifically in high school and college, like nobody really messed with me because ultimately you're dealing with him. And I know that. And to watch him finally get the credit that he deserved, as a heart and soul of that team and score that goal. It was, I mean, one of my favorite memories from my career, and it had nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with him.
Yeah. And again, Duke fan and still can't be too mad at him. Hold
on. Duke fan. I got to ask you about this. Oh, I bet this killed you when Benson did this. The second, so I have two favorite Benson Irwin plays of all time. The first one obviously is that goal that puts us in the national championship. My second favorite play all time. Like, you don't see this shit happen anymore. We're down the Duke at Homewood. It's that same year, it's senior year. We're down by one. Had to be like a minute left, maybe a little less. Duke has the ball. And that our class, and we've never lost at Homewood in 4 years. It's number one team in the country against number two team in the country. Their midfielder has the ball behind the goal. And we don't send a pole out to guard him. We send Benson out to guard him. With the idea of like, let's just see if you can maybe get him out of bounds. Let's see if we can press him enough that he'll dodge, we'll slide, we'll double it, we'll pinch it, we can put the ball on the ground. But really, honestly, realistically, in our head, being like, this is shitty. Like this will be our first loss on Homewood Field in this class. And Benson like fakes like a slap and butt things this dude, pops the ball up. We go down, we score, which is unheard. A short stick tripping a first-team All-American is insane. And in that moment, again, like a guy that never gets credit, like he won us a game. I think we go down. I think I was fortunate enough to score or tie it up. We go into overtime. Paul picks up a ground ball, hits Huntley. Huntley gets underneath, gets popped, and scores, and that's that. Obviously, the Huntley goal is what They show it everywhere, but Benson stripping a first team All-American is insane.
Yeah, I'm glad that that was in an era in which, at least in North Carolina, watching lacrosse was very difficult to do, and I didn't have to watch it live.
Well, Neil, I got you covered, but I will. Coach Dwan gave me a drive that has every game from my college career. I will grab that clip for you, and I'll get that up on the internet just so you have it.
I appreciate that, Kyle. Thank you. So sophomore season, you have a 20 game point streak. You're the only sophomore to be a wartime finalist, and yet somehow we're only a second team All-American, but we won't talk about that. But the thing that I will always remember, that is what and I know it's a little bit of probably a sore spot for you. That national championship game is still to date the best game I've ever seen. I know there's been, overtime games. There's that Syracuse Cornell game, and I think it was 2009.
Right.
There's some great games, but that game is what made, like, that sunk lacrosse in to me. I had only kind of just started playing about a year earlier than that. Didn't really know what I was doing. Wasn't playing any organized. We decided we wanted to have a team at my school, and a group of us had signed a petition saying that we would play. Got those little $30 complete sticks and went out on the football practice field, and didn't even have a goal. We set up there was a folding table out there. We set it up on its end, and that was the goal. I had no idea what we were doing. So
that serves its purpose.
Yeah. So this was the game that, that game was, we obviously probably most known as the Tillman Johnson game.
Big balls, it's a bummer.
What? Yeah, for you maybe. Yeah, right. Payback for what would come later, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
But I guess you got the last laugh though, because it was your senior year.
Yep.
What, that game was in Baltimore, hometown crowd. What are your memories of that game? Being a sophomore and everything. It's still fairly early for you. Yeah,
I loved it, man. I think we that was a fun weekend, and to your point, we definitely lost. But there was so much to learn from that whole experience. Like I remember, that first off, the Virginia team was phenomenal, right? Like I think on the defensive side of the ball, I think it was obviously Hughes was their guy, but then Trey Whitty, Ned Bowen, Steve Holmes, they had a great defensive group, and then on the other side, and then obviously Tillman on the other side of the ball. You're talking AJ Shannon, Ratelli, Christmas, Uvoli. They were unbelievable. I think what I took from that game, outside of obviously the disappointment, the loss, it was two memories like stick out in my head really vividly from both teams. On Virginia side, like watching what Chris Ratelli did, I was like, that's unbelievable. Like he's their best player. He plays both sides of the ball. He'll face off. He'll make whatever play needs to happen for that team, whether it's like a grunt play, like a hard work play, or like a big goal. This dude will do whatever is necessary. Like that's what a senior captain, midfielder, leader does. So I remember thinking like that. Glad I got to witness that. Bummer that it happened to us, but glad I got to witness that. And then the flip side, and that's what I want to be, right? Like when I get there to that point, that's what I want to be. And then what confirmed that, again, I was just a sophomore. I got in the locker room, and it was our first national championship appearance for my group. And we're in the Final Four last year. I want to say we lost to Princeton, and so we're in the locker room, and it's kind of a surreal atmosphere, right? It's you always want the last game you play to be like the one you won or the championship, and so like we made it all the way there, and I'm upset about it. I feel like there was a press conference, and I came back in, and Bobby Benson, one of our senior captains, he had a bunch of cameras around him. They're interviewing him at his locker. And I remember it's like it was yesterday. They go, how we feeling, Bobby? Like, give us whatever the question was. And Bobby, like with tears in his eyes, was like, I don't want to take this jersey off because I know I'm never going to get to put it back on again. And I remember being like, shit. One, that's heavy. And two, like, that can't be us. Like Bobby, Adam, Michael Pizer, that whole senior group that sacrificed so much and taught us so much and really brought us, we were freshmen. I want to say when we were freshmen, we started 7 of us, I want to say, like brought us along when they didn't have to. Like they've been through too much that like before our time is done, we have to win. So people like Bobby didn't do this in vain. Like they sacrificed so much for us to have the opportunity. That can't be how this ends for us in 2 years. And so I remember those 2 memories of like setting the stage for me mentally for the rest of my career, what Chris Rotelli did, and then listening to Bobby's comments as a senior that would never get to put on that jersey again, and making sure that we would not experience.
Yeah, no, that I obviously ultimately you did do those things, so it's interesting to see that seed was planted all the way back as a sophomore. So junior year you win the McLaughlin Award as the nation's best midfielder. You're a two-time finalist again, and then senior year, not much to talk about there, right? We can just slide right past that.
Senior year.
No, you guys go 16-0. You beat Duke in the championship. You're the McLaughlin Award winner again, and you win the Tewaaraton. And it blew my mind that to date you are still the only Hopkins player to ever win the Tewaaraton.
Yeah.
Which I had to go back. I read that line somewhere and I went back and I was like, no, there's no way. This must be old. Like it certainly happened since. And no, it hasn't. I can't. That blows my mind. I really don't have much to talk about this senior year.
Look, man, tough go for your boys.
It was, and it was a great season for you guys. And again, if I've said it before, mostly half joking that you were one of those guys that like I just love to watch, and I couldn't. If Duke had to lose, like I'm glad it was you holding the trophy at the end of the year. So
I appreciate that.
But then you go to the MLL. You're drafted number 1 overall by the New Jersey Pride. Twice an MLL All-Star, but that's probably the high water mark of those Pride years for all the great players that are on those teams. It just didn't click for some reason. I don't know.
I don't know, man. Look, it's and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Because we couldn't figure it out, right? We had phenomenal players. For whatever reason, we just could never put it together. I enjoyed my time there, right? Like, I got to play with Jesse Hubbard, and I got to reconnect with Adam Doniger and Connor Ford, and a bunch of the Hopkins guys for the few years I was in Jersey before popping out to LA. I don't know. I don't know. It was bizarre. I honestly don't have it. I don't have an answer of what happened. That midfield alone right there is like just insane. Like it's hard to beat that. AJ Hogan, my idol, was on the team, and he's banged up for a little bit. He was banged up for a little bit, but he was on the. I don't, brother. Your guess is good as mine. I have no idea what happened.
Yeah. So you just mentioned it, that after that you moved out to LA. I was surprised kind of researching this. You played 1 year in LA.
Yeah.
And then they folded and you played for 1 year for Denver.
Yeah.
And I think LA is probably one of the teams that you're like most known for playing for.
Oh yeah.
And yet no one remembers that hardly anyone remembers that you played for the Outlaws, even though the Outlaws went to the championship that year, and you were there for the same amount of time. What do you think it was about that Riptide team specifically that kind of captured the zeitgeist of the moment and just kind of was this big, huge thing? Still is, really.
No, for sure. So I'd say the first thing on the Denver side, I think it probably wasn't known because I played game 1 and then tore my hamstring game 2 and didn't play again until the playoffs. So like I probably played 4 games for Denver all in, right? Because I think we made a run. I think we lost in the championship, did we?
To Toronto.
Yeah. I think we lost the championship. So like I literally played first game, tore it the second game, came back for the last regular season game and was like hesitant to run, and then played the semis championship. And I think that was it. So I'd assume that's why the Denver experiment. Didn't get talked about much. But anyway, back to LA. Look, man, that team doesn't fold. We go on a run for sure. If that team doesn't fold, we were so talented. And I mean, defensively, we were great. We saved the ball at a high clip with Jarbo. And then offensively, there were just so many weapons. Like it was Kevin Huntley, Jesse Hubbard. You couldn't cover Chaz, myself. Who else was at the midfield? Sean Lindsay, Graham Gill, that could like run for a full game without subbing. Like it was just like a really good thing we had going. And what I would say, Neil, is it was really similar culturally to what I landed on in Ohio, what you hear about with the Bayhawks, what you hear about with the Outlaws. Like we had like a good culture thing going with an incredible GM and GW mix out there in LA. And like, we Anthony Kelly was our face-off guy. We had a really, really good thing going. And I think the reason that that team is talked about a lot, LA Riptide, is it was cool colors. It was, I think about from just a marketing perspective and eyeballs on lacrosse, had that team hung around. We were playing at Home Depot right when David Beckham got traded to the Galaxy. So like Beckham was there and like drawing all kinds of crazy crowds to Home Depot where we were. And it would be right next to us, but obviously we'd have some trickle over. Like there was some good momentum building there. So I think that's why it was talked about. Like it was just, we had a chance. I think we lost the championship too, if I remember correctly. Or the semis, either semis or championship.
Semis to the Outlaws.
Yeah, that feels right. And like, it was just, we had a good thing going. I loved it. That's why I moved originally. Well, I was moving either way. And then Brett and I made the call to New Jersey. I'm like, look, like, let's just make this easier on everybody. And like, let's get traded to LA. So you guys aren't paying for us to fly back here and, vice versa.
So at the end of that Outlaws season, you leave the MLL and create LXM Pro Tour. What's the impetus kind of in that moment of deciding to create your own league?
The bummer in it, Neil, and we could probably do our own podcast just on LXM. Me, Xander, Max, and Scott and Craig I've talked about for years, doing like an hour long just talk about what LXM was and why we did it. But honestly, the bummer in it is that like originally it was when we first had the convo, like the first conversation about LXM was let's create something in the off season for dudes that like play outdoor, don't play indoor like me, to like play. Like so they can play and get paid. That was it. They could do it in conjunction while also playing the MLL. That was the original plan. And then when that conversation happened, we were told no, like guys can't play in your outdoor thing while also being signed to contracts the MLL. So we were like, all right, well, like we're already this far down the path. Like I guess this is what we're doing. And so we went forward with it. We started the LXM Pro Tour. The first year had a couple events. Second year, a couple more. Then by year 3, I think we're up to like 10, 12 events, which was great. A lot of playing. And it was lacrosse. It was a big lacrosse event or lacrosse pro game, all-star game, a concert connected to it, some type of festival as we partnered with Adrenaline. But it was a ton of fun. Learned a ton from a business perspective, obviously. Lost a lot of money. It's how it goes, right? But built something again and learned something. And I think ultimately, we were Scott in particular, Scott Hockstedt was the first person out to LA, he and his brother, because he's older than us. But he was like at the brink of a lot of things that are happening now, right? Whether that's using influencers or leaning on Hollywood and new media at the time to drive value. And like, whether that was, Scott was on The Hills and Scott, was on American Idol. Like he was in everywhere and getting LXM into these conversations and doing it, in mid 2000s. So it was a ton of fun, man.
So along those lines,
yeah,
it's interesting to hear that you say that it was originally designed to be kind of a both thing, play in the MLL and then play LXM.
It's never supposed to be competitive.
Because I've just read, and again, learning something new every time, that when you guys signed the deal with the MLL in 2014, that it was originally announced that that's what it was going to be, was that guys would play MLL during the summer and then LXM Pro Tour in the off season, which obviously kind of didn't really happen. But it made me wonder, was there much thought given to saying no to the MLL at that point, or was it just like, no, this thing's kind of done, it's run its course as competition?
No, dude, there were so many different, like, there was levels to like each of our collective interests in driving that thing, right? So like for me personally, outside of the obvious, which was like we all just moved to LA, and I was like, oh my god, like, I'm not trying to fly. It was a bunch of like Christmas is out there. He's still out there. There was like a bunch of dudes who had just moved to the West Coast, and San Fran folded and LA folded. So you did have a big group of professional level players living on the West Coast. So that was the obvious part. And then you mix that with Scott's ability to really get into Hollywood circles and drive value that like he had no business being in some of these meetings, in some of these rooms. And Scott just has the ability to get in there. And it's honestly unbelievable. But, so you have that. But then for me personally, if you rewind back to what was going on at that point, like MLL was still all Warrior. And so for a guy that was an STX and Nike guy, I could never wear my stuff playing professionally. And it felt like I had already made the decision that like professional lacrosse is what I'm going to pursue. Right? I'm playing, I have all these sponsors, I'm building a brand, like I'm giving this a real go. And so when thinking about driving value to my sponsors, I'm like, I mean, every Saturday I'm playing in something that's not them. Collectively, literally from head to toe, I'm not wearing STX or Nike. So then when we launched LXM, it gave me the opportunity to wear Nike and STX equipment. I was wearing my own equipment line, K18, and wearing Nike cleats. And there was a big fight at that time with us and Warrior, because Warrior actually sponsored the LXM Pro Tour that first year. And we had to have a clause out so I could wear my stuff. Like, okay, we're appreciative that you're sponsoring this tour, but like a big part of this for me personally was that I was able to wear this stuff. So it was great. They allowed us to have that clause in there for me to wear my stuff. And then when you fast forward, Neil, to 4 years later, when we merged back with the MLL, now the equipment pool was open, and now I was able to get back into the MLL wearing my own equipment. So on a personal side, for me, as a guy that was like in the process of building a brand and trying to drive value to sponsors, like coming back to the MLL, not only are the best players over here, but now it's also a position that like you can drive value to your sponsors because you can actually represent them on a professional field. And so that at the end there was really no thought of like holding on to it and let's drive forward. It was like, man, this was a crazy 4-year run. That went completely, like, again, when we started it, it was like additive to the MLL and like, this is going to be great. We're going to get all the support from lacrosse. And then when like, it was like no, you can't do both. And we turned into a competitor. It was like, oh shit. Oh, well, this is certainly a different business, right? And then any of us were prepared to run, because now not only are we competitors with the MLL, but then there was this thing that was developing of like, now that we're almost kind of competitors with the MLL players. Because now they're getting pissed because we got like the Brattons come out and they play LXM, and then Peter Baum, who obviously we knew from the time he was a little guy, because he's from Portland and he played in a lot of the West Coast programming out there. So we've known him since middle school. Now he comes out, he plays LXM. And so now we're like, oh shit. Like we went from trying to like create a situation that was happy for everyone and guys would get paid to play in the offseason to like being their competitor and the MLL being frustrated with us, players now getting frustrated because we're taking play. Like, I don't know. It turned into something that we like honestly mentally did not set out to do in terms of that
right.
portion. And so by the time a deal was struck, like, okay, I'd like to go back to being the player and go compete for a bit. My only regret for LXM is those 4 years were like some of my prime years physically. Like, I mean, from 2009 to 2013, I was, what was that? I don't know. It was like 25 to 29. Like I was moving pretty well. And so I would have loved for those years to be where the best players were, for sure.
Yeah. So the deal happens and you move back to the MLL, and the Ohio Machine get your rights. I don't know if there was a dispersal draft or how exactly that went.
Yeah, there was.
But,
That was a mess.
Yeah. So, I was reading that you, when that happened, that you had just moved to Charlotte or were just moving to
Yeah,
Charlotte, and
it was a
you
mess.
tried to get them to
Crazy.
send you to Charlotte. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was yeah, man. So my wife and I had made the decision to come back to the East Coast from LA, and we had picked Charlotte, as I mentioned earlier. I had a bunch of family in Durham, and so Ohio had the number one pick in the dispersal draft, but I was moving to Charlotte, and like I had a conversation with my wife about like living where we play, and like this is going to be so much easier than everything we've done, and so like I remember I called Coach Davis, called Bear, and was like, look, what I, I've heard that you guys considering taking me, which I'm very appreciative of, honored that you consider me at the position. That said, like I just moved to Charlotte. Is there any way that like you'd consider trading me to Charlotte or trading the pick or whatever needs to happen? And honestly, I appreciate this answer from Bear more than he knows. But he said, look, we have a really good thing going here in Ohio. We have like some young guys that play extremely hard, and we're trying to build something here. We need some veteran leadership, and so we're going to take you. Come here. Let's try it for a year. If you still ultimately feel like this is not the spot for you, like let's revisit the conversation, and let's get you to Charlotte. And so I appreciated his just honesty around the combo, and around like kind of what the experience could potentially turn into in Ohio. And I got there within like first half an hour of practice. I knew I wasn't going anywhere. It was like, again, I mentioned it earlier, the culture was very similar to like LA, what I experienced in LA. And then I would go into experience with the Redwoods. Like it felt like the right spot to be. You had Steele Stamwick, you had Marcus Holman, you had Dominique Alexander, you had, Tommy Schreiber would end up coming there a year later. Peter Baum came with me, like because they had his rights from the draft the prior year. Like it was a special group. And so within, again, 30 minutes of being that first practice of training camp, I was set on Ohio.
North Carolina boy. Sorry to see that you didn't end up in Charlotte, but hearing you say he makes that call, I think that what a call to be like to recognize what was there, because they had 4 wins in 2 seasons, and while not technically related, the Chicago Machine weren't any better, right? So to be able to see what was there, to see the pieces. I know Marcus Holman was already there. I think they already had was it Brian Phipps and Scotty Rogers that were the two?
Yep, they had Phipps, they had Rogers, they had Steele, I think. And then, from Bear's perspective, as all that was coming together, he's like looking at his team and what he's going to have access. So he's going to have the number one pick again. So he knows Tom Schreiber's on the way. And then, when you think like Peter Baum changes your team instantly, right? Like forget everything else I've said thus far. You put Peter Baum at the midfield, change your team instantly because their best pole now has to come cover him. And then you add me to that mix, but still a youngish me, right? I think I was 30 at the time, whatever it is, still moving. And then Tom Schreiber, like he could see what was coming together and then what was going to be needed from a leadership perspective, just from a veteran seat. And that's all I tried to do. So no, he and his staff, they saw it for sure.
Yeah, so that 2014 season, almost instantly, you guys you make the playoffs, which no Machine team, whether to Ohio or Chicago, had done. And then that next season, you're the second best team in the league, only behind that Monstars New York Lizards team that I can't even believe they were able to assemble. That thing was insane.
That's right.
And then 2016, you guys are the best team in the league. And those are probably, I think 20 was it? I can't remember if it was 2014 or 2015 was statistically your best season.
2014
was 2014. And what did you? What's that?
I said only time in my career I played angry, like I was livid.
Was it okay? So it was that, it was as well as like a combination of legs still being able to go and kind of like old enough to know.
Yeah. It was all that, right? Like it was. I keep receipts in my head, no different from any other athlete. That's not irregular. Like I remember people talking about like people at LXM couldn't play in this thing. Like I remember, yeah, for sure. So that whole year, I mean, you can even see me in the Charlotte game. I am not a talker by any means. Never was. Even if you talk to me, like it would take a lot for me to say something back. You watch me in that first game back in the MLL, Charlotte. I mean, I'm yapping the entire. I was so angry, and like I remember after the game being like, I gotta get it back together. I don't. Mentally, it was exhausting because that's just not my personality, and that's certainly not how I play. But that whole year, I'd say maybe better than angry was just like a real chip on my shoulder of like something to prove. And honestly, I lucked out because I was gone for 4 years. Like especially, I think as I got older, and even when I was younger, specifically in college, because you could scout better because you had so much more film. Like I had a lot of combo dodges, But if I wasn't doing a combo, my dodges are like very rhythmic, right? Like it's a 1, 2, 3 or what, like whatever I'm doing. And so if you've played me a bunch, like it turns into like a chess match between me and you of like, all right, I'm gonna do the 1, 2, 3, and then if you do a nice job, I'm gonna roll back, and then maybe I'm coming back again. Like it was always a chess match. But when I got back to the MLL after 4 years, it was like a whole new crop of defensive midfielders or poles that hadn't ever played against me before. It's like I got to go back to like one move and just getting a shot off, like back to some of my stuff, which I remember loving and needing it mentally and confidence wise. Of like, because obviously, as I just said, I play with a chip on my shoulder, but I'm no different from any other athlete. That also in the back of my head is like, can I still do this shit? Like, am I going to be okay out here? And so that was a really fun year for me, and I think personally, having the sport when you have surrounded by Tom Schreiber and Peter Baum and Steele Stanwyck and Marcus Holman, it certainly makes it easier to get yourself going, because those are some of the best players to ever play professional lacrosse.
Yeah, if you're listening, go find that 2014 Kyle Harrison tape. It's out there. It's
Angry man.
It's very good. It's very good. So, but in 2016, you guys, like we said, were the best team in the league. And you get into the championship against the Outlaws, and you guys are killing it. You're up 9-3, seem to be cruising to victory. And then there's the weather delay. And I know a lot of the Machine players and coaches said that wasn't the reason, but it really felt, watching it. I watched that game live, and it felt like coming back out of that, the whole game just changed. But Eric Law scores with 12.9 seconds left, and they win 19-18. I'm wondering if there was any point after that game where you thought it just wasn't going to happen. I mean, at this point, I believe you've played 9-10 years in the MLL with the 4-year break.
Yeah.
And it's just not how. Is there any part of you that's feeling like that the MLL championship just isn't going to happen, or was it just immediately, all right, next year is the year? What was it, just on to the next one?
Definitely like, look, for me, it was that Ohio run for me personally felt very much like college. It felt like year one, we were close in terms of just putting it all together. We finally got this team to the playoff that was getting the doors blown off the past few years. Year two, I think we lost to the Rattlers again in the semifinals. But again, we were putting the pieces together, and it was all starting to come together. Year three, we make it to the championship, and honestly really felt like we had an opportunity to win that game and put that game away. And there was a bunch. I mean, obviously, weather for our type of team definitely had an impact. I don't think it's the reason we lost the game. I wouldn't go that far. But like, to pretend that like a dude like me plays better in 11 inches of rain than I do in a dry field is silly, right? And Peter Baum, is another twitchy, fast guy that, he pulls his hamstring at the beginning of the second half. Like, yeah, the weather impacted us. And that wasn't the reason we lost, but it certainly impacted our team. And Denver they made more plays, especially at the end. Their veterans made plays for them. And Law's goal is what, I mean, you look at Law film, that's what he does, right? And so that made sense. But then that fourth year, the reality is that was like a senior year situation. Like, we went through that year, and we had finally gotten to a point that there was zero concern. It definitely had the college, like go down in a game or or drop a game. There was never any panic. Like even when Denver went up in the championship game in 2017, like the sidelines, like heads weren't down. It was like, right, like we'll battle back in the same, win a couple draws, and we'll make plays. And I get chills when you walk. There's so many different plays from players that happen in that game that I could like rattle them off you and off my top of my head. That like just like the confidence people played with. Like there's one, Jake Bernhardt throws like a 35-yard skip pass on a clear to Marcus Holman, who steps in and one just hammers the corner. Tom Schreiber throws a fake and throws off his back foot through the defense. Marcus Holman hammers another corner. Chase Carrero turns. I mean, there were so many things that like dudes were doing that you could go back and watch, and the confidence level is off the charts, and it's just a testament to like what that team was about. Like they had been through there were some guys that had been through more years than 4 years of shit, right? But there was a couple of like their 4-year run we had been on, like they'd seen everything, and so like being down in a championship did not have any sort of impact on how folks viewed what was going to happen in the end. Like it felt like a 4-year run of a college program.
I didn't even connect those dots that it was 4 years and the ones between Outlaws. But yeah, in 2017, you guys lifted it, and I don't even think the most diehard Outlaws fans were mad at seeing you lift the. I mean, I'm sure they wanted it, but
it was a great game, man. It was honestly, I enjoyed it. I look back on the chase for a professional championship fondly. Like that's what it's supposed to be hard, right? This is not easy. None of it is easy. And then there are some people that I won't say luck out. They're just in a position that it comes quicker, right? That they're able to win a championship in their first few years, or even their first 5, 6, 7 years. Like, but no, the reality is for most people, it never happens. And then if you're lucky enough, like you have to just wait it out and grind it out and keep going. And my Ohio machine run, I look back on those years so fondly. I loved every minute of it.
Awesome. So after that, you're one of the first people to be involved in creating the PLL. And how much of your experience and stuff with LXM, like, were you able to bring in to what they were doing with the PLL? Obviously, it wasn't your baby, but you were relatively involved in it. So
yeah, no, I mean, I was involved early. I remember me and Paul Paul and I really until the PLL, our professional career, like we kind of worked like for competitors at all times. Like he's building the brand, I'm building the brand. He's with Maverick and/or Warrior or Under Armour. I'm with Nike and STX. So we like never really got to work together. Obviously, respect for each other and teammates on Team USA, teammates at Hopkins. So like had a relationship built, but professionally, like there was really no reason to cross over because we were working with competitors. And so every year at the convention, we'd like, yo, let's grab a drink tomorrow. Let's grab breakfast, whatever it is. He'd get caught up in something. I'd get caught up in something, and we'd end up rescheduling. And so this was 2018 in January. And he hits me. He's like, yo, let's make sure we get breakfast at the convention. And I was like, okay, like bet. And then the night before, he hits me like, yo, I need you to actually be at the Iron Rooster tomorrow. We say this every year. You have to actually get breakfast. And I got a topic we got to rap about. So we sit down for breakfast, and he's like rolling out what he and Mike would like to build. And obviously, like my mind went to, I'm assuming this is a couple years off. And it did have like, as he talked about it, like I'm hearing about the athletes. And of course, my mind goes to LXM. It's like, oh, okay. Like, obviously, this is significantly more organized, better funded, more thought through, all those things. But it obviously has its similarities in some cases as well. And so I'm like, all right, when are you thinking? Again, ready for him to say like 2020. He's like, announcing in the fall. It's like, oh, got it. Okay. This is like, you've done a lot more work. This is no longer just an idea. And so my role at the beginning with Paul and Mike was really just athlete acquisition and having these conversations with dudes of what they were building and why, and what the opportunity would look like, and why I was doing it. Like I kept it a buck from that perspective. Like I was still playing at the time, so I wasn't saying something that like I myself wasn't doing as well. So it made it like an easier discussion, if that makes sense. And that was it, man. So yeah, no, it was fun to be a part of at the beginning. And, I think ultimately the feelings of like being a part of operating the league while also playing in the league, how Paul did it for as long as he did, is absolutely wild.
Yeah. Watching Fate of a Sport, you really see some. Yeah. I'm sure there's plenty that we don't see, but even just in that level, it's like, man, I can't imagine having to try to do that. So,
no.
So not a ton to talk about in the PLL other than the 2019 season, getting to the championship, losing in overtime. I was there. That game was great, but and I like Matt Rambo as a human and everything, but as a player, as a Maryland guy, as with Snakes, I just so mad.
Brother, I have never experienced. That's the only game I've ever been a part of where like you hear it all the time, right? Change in the blink of an eye. But so when me and Joe Walters, talk about this honestly relatively frequently. But that when he scored that goal, I can't remember. It was 11 seconds left, 9. It was some tiny amount of time, 9 seconds left, and we got Greg facing off. Like I'm watching. I remember being on the sideline after that goal. So we're up 1, like 9 seconds left in the fourth quarter, whatever the time was. I'm watching like Joe take his equipment off, like get ready to like run out and celebrate. And I'm like, oh yeah, man, I guess we're up 1. Greg's like, pop our stuff, like yeah, and then. I think they win the draw or something. I can't remember how they got the ball, but they call timeout. They come off a pick, and Rambo scores. I'm like, oh my, wait, what? We were like in championship celebration mode, and then obviously we go to overtime and lose. But that was a bummer. I have never experienced in my life in a game that feeling of like, oh my gosh, we won, to like devastation. 30 seconds later. Just a mess.
When they got that ball in overtime, the whole crowd around me was just like, oh crap, like what?
It was just such a mess. Hard stuff.
Speaking of Joe, we didn't talk about him at all. What does it mean to you that I think it's your last point and his last goal are to each other?
Vice versa. Our last
vice versa. Okay.
His last assist, my last goal.
Your last goal.
Yeah. That's my guy. I think things happen for a reason. It was and it's funny how it did happen, right? Like, I've watched that play a bunch, obviously. And I don't know who they were passing the ball to. I think Ryder like skipped one off of his back foot. Into a crowd. It definitely wasn't to me, because everyone that has played with me knows if I'm on the crease, do not throw that thing in there unless I am wide open and I'm not going to get checked. And so he threw one in there, and like, again, it could not have been to me, but I'm watching the ball bounce around, and it goes out to Joe. And because I was on the crease, I just like happened to be in a great spot. Joe throws it, and literally all I have to do is like do a dip and dunk and score. It was great. Obviously, I'll trade that goal for a win in that game, 10 times out of 10. But it's cool that the last points of our career were with each other.
Yeah. I know you've probably got to get out of here. I've taken up a lot of your time. So
good, I got 10 minutes. We're good.
Okay. I got about 2 or 3 more questions. I'll ask you fairly quickly. You talked about, getting the chance to watch the game and to be maybe more involved on kind of behind the scenes. What do you feel is your role in the game right now?
Man, it depends on like in what space. Obviously, with everything we're doing at 1812, with our teams and our training opportunities, whether that's Clippers here in Annapolis, Team 18, nationally, Sonics down in the Greenville, Nashville area, just coaching the next generation of players and helping players develop. There's that side of it. From a pro player perspective, like I am still a resource for any dudes that are trying to navigate this space and what it looks like to drive value to your sponsors or even get sponsors, or or how to build their brands within lacrosse, how to build their business within lacrosse. So look, man, anybody that reaches out, I try to be as helpful as I possibly can. The same way that when I came out, Jesse Hubbard taught me how he built what he was building at Warrior. And I picked Ryan Boyle's brain all the time back when I was just out there, and I was watching everything he was doing with Trilogy and what they've continued to build and build their successful business. Strebel, like no different from how those guys treated me. I try and treat this next generation. I think time, man, goes so fast. Like when the beginning of this interview, where you asking me, we were talking about Jersey and we were talking about retirement. It's like, I remember sitting in the Team USA locker room, and I was the youngest. Me and Joe Walters were the two youngest guys in 2006. And we were sitting in there with Pat McCabe, and Pat McCabe was like, this goes faster than you could ever imagine. Like, enjoy every single second of it. It's not going to be long that you're going to be the guy sitting in my shoes, saying the same thing to some other rookie, some other young guy, and then and we're here. Like, Joe and I are both retired. Like, it goes so fast, man. So I'm just trying to pay it forward the same way that the dudes that came before us did. We'll do the same, and then hopefully this next generation will do the same, and it'll continue to grow.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Nobody when they're that young can comprehend. It's really one of those things that you'll only see on this side. And I was just talking, Thanksgiving weekend to my sister. I was in the military, and then she joined. She actually came to my basic training graduation. Wait, was like, I want to do.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that I was in the military?
I don't think so. What branch?
Oh. I was in the Air Force for about for 7 years.
Incredible. Thank you for your service. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I clearly haven't stalked you enough. I didn't think enough. Incredible, man. I had no idea.
Yeah, no worries. But we were just talking about, she's getting at that point where she's trying to decide whether she's going to stay in or she's going to and try and retire, or she's going to try and get out. Yeah. And she's got about 10 years left. And I was like, I got out 10 years ago in 2014, and I was like, I mean, gone. Like, looking back on it, I'm like, what? I have no idea. It's gone. So it's one of those things that people just don't know until you're on this side of it.
That's right.
The NLL started this weekend, and you said, you talked briefly about how you didn't play NLL. I'm wondering, did you ever consider playing in the NLL? Was there talks about it? And if not, why not?
I wish I would have, in retrospect. I think I would have been more skilled. I think I would have understood two-man game better. I think I would have understood angles better had I played indoor. I got drafted to Philly. I was banged up coming out of college, just hamstrings, back, everything. And so I, made it through that MLL season, and then took that winter to get healthy, and never really considered it. I mean, honestly, Neil, like I said, I wish I would have played, but my logic at the time was like, I just signed with STX. I just released my own equipment line. I just signed with Nike. I'm traveling all over the place. In my head, I was thinking, like, am I going to add another, 6 months of travel to my schedule, right? Those guys, they play so long. Once you start, I mean, they started training camp. I feel like between the PLL end of season and the NLL start of training camp, I mean, you're looking at 3 weeks. Look at the Josh Burns of the world that, like, they just literally just play. I and Schreiber, those guys. I back then, I was like, for the longevity of my outdoor career, I was thinking back then, like, maybe I'll sit this out. I'll continue to build value and drive these sponsorships that I have and this brand that STX is building with me. And that was my logic back then. Again, in retrospect, I wish I would have played, for sure.
You talk about your K-18 line. That was kind of, we just learned I was in the military, and I had a little bit of a dark period with the game when I was in basic training, and my first duty station was New Mexico. And, I just was out of the game for a good while. So I missed most of your K-18 line. But I did want to say, I'll show you right here.
Let's go.
Let's go. Funny. I was just going to wear this, but it does not fit me like it did when I bought it. Another part of getting older.
No, me neither, brother. Things don't fit like they used to. But send me your address, man. I didn't know you didn't have any K-18 stuff. We'll get you taken care of.
Oh man, I would love it. I don't have anything here, but I did have some space where I was like, keeping collectibles, and I've got some Duke gear, lots of Duke gear, obviously, and anything.
We'll get you some Hop stuff. We'll get rid of that Duke stuff. We'll get you some Hop stuff, and we'll get. Oh, you look, there'll be Hop K18s. It's a win. It's a win for everybody.
I would take that, and for as much as I don't want to admit this, that 2005 Hopkins, that whole kit, that whole Nike kit, that is crazy. All-time favorite. Crazy. So anyway, I'll get you out on this, and I really, really appreciate all the time. You have always been so gracious with your time with me personally, and everyone I know has a K18 story, and they're all, that level. So you were talking about watching the game, and I know the last time we talked, you specifically talked about how you don't have time between trying to play yourself and having young kids. Then who is your favorite player to watch now? We can cheat it a little bit if you want to say a couple or whatever. But.
Yeah. Look, man. Favorite is so tough because there's so many good players.
Yeah, there are.
These dudes are great. Like, I mean, you watch Tom Schreiber play. I've never seen anyone do the things that Tom does, the way Tom does them. And so, I mean, it's obviously a close friend of mine, but he's unbelievable. Like, if Tom Schreiber's on TV playing indoor, outdoor, at the beach, backyard, I'm watching. So he is certainly that guy. Josh Byrne is that guy as well. Like, he's unbelievable to watch. I think, Jack Rowlett makes some plays. I feel like I tweeted about one last summer. He makes some plays that like you shouldn't make, and they just kind of go. Nobody talks about them. They go unnoticed. Like he went. I can't remember who was dodging. Somebody was dodging. He went over the head and took the ball. But then, I think he slid. Slid went over the head, took the ball, but then also somehow got the ground ball and like took off up the field and started transition. Like just stuff that like what. And so there's a bunch of them. I could list forever, but if you said, Kyle, go ahead and pick one, 2026 is the guy.
Yeah. No, another guy that I didn't want to like because he was at Princeton, and then you just watch him play and you're just like,
there's nothing the guy does everything right on off the field. He is, I know he's not a social media guy. I know he is not a guy that puts himself out there and likes that part of the business, but Tom Schreiber is the face of the sport, and he is the thing that if it's happening, I don't care if it's a scrimmage, backyard game, NLL, PLL, I'm watching Tom Schreiber.
Yeah, I picked when they launched the logos and everything. I picked the Archers just based on colors and logos. And when the roster dropped and it was him and Will Manny and all the rest of the guys that were on it, but when it was Tom Schreiber, I was like, oh, hey, that worked out pretty well.
He's the other one, Blaze. Like I think. Oh yeah. I think people talk about it a little bit, but probably not as much as it should be talked about. Like the clip at which he saves the ball. The moments, and I mean, I think professional goalies that catch the ball clean are insane. Like Blaze consistently is not giving. Like he is catching things, and you're up and out, which is unbelievable. And then you flip to it's all of a sudden it's December, and you're minding your business, and you turn on the NLL. The dude has a short stick and is scoring goals. So he's unbelievable. I mean, that's another one that if he's on TV, Blaze Reardon, playing indoor or outdoor, I'm watching whatever's happening.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time. I know you got to get out of here, so thank you very much.
I got to jump to my 12:15, but I appreciate your time, brother. Send me your address. Get you some K18 stuff.
All right, bro. Will do. Thank you.
Talk soon, man. Bye. Thanks for your service. See ya.
A huge thank you to Kyle for joining me today. I had a blast catching up with him and talking over his career. I feel like we only just sort of scratched the surface of things that we did talk about, and there are, as always in this kind of format, plenty of things that we did not talk about. So hopefully we can get Kyle back on the show in the not too distant future and talk about some of those things. In other news, this is now 4 episodes in. Hopefully you guys have a feel for the show now, and hopefully you've been enjoying it. If you have been enjoying it, please subscribe to the show. And if you have already subscribed to the show, please write a review, leave a rating, all those things, as it would really help other people find the show, as well as hopefully make this a bit easier for us to keep doing in the future. But that is all I have for you guys this week. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you next week.